Cara, how are you?
I'm good. Michael, how are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Um, do me a favor first and just tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and who you do it for.
Absolutely. So, my name is Cara Snow. I am the Chief Community Engagement Officer for the Technology Association of Oregon. We are a statewide industry association that is focused on creating an inclusive innovation economy based on technology throughout the state of Oregon and Southwest Washington. And that was a lot of fancy words, but basically what I do is engage with our members and our partners, advocate for tech policy that's good statewide, and really get to lead conversations about innovation, entrepreneurship, and a lot around workforce and talent development.
That is a very, you've done that before, I'm guessing. Made that
I've done that a few
explanation.
times.
Okay, good. So what's exciting right now, just in the general world of tech? We'll get into ag and tech here in a minute, but what gets you out of bed in the morning when you think about technology?
Yeah, it's really an interesting question, particularly during this COVID chapter. I think that we all just worked under this assumption that the world was going to stop. And what's got me excited is like the innovation has accelerated. And it's not just in tech, but it's across all industries looking at tech differently. Um, and I think sometimes you hear technology association and you think like software and hardware, but we're also working with companies that are creating nano materials that are better for healthcare providers to protect them at this juncture of the world. And so I get up every morning and I'm like, what new cool thing do I get to like hear about and learn about? And then I get even more excited because I'm like, what new cool thing is happening that's being done in Oregon?
Yeah. What are some of those cool things that are happening in our state that maybe people don't know about?
Great question. So one of my favorite stories is a member company based out of Eugene's down in the southern Willamette Valley, who had created a online education platform for students who learned differently, predominantly children with autism.
Okay.
They were a small company. The pandemic hit. We're doing this over Zoom. Every company has all of their employees sitting at home on Zoom. There were a lot of big companies that realized that they have employees that this is challenging for because of just different learning abilities or cognitive differences.
Picking up on social cues, even, it's harder when you when you're not in
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
And this company that was focused on um, online learning for kids in a normal environment has now been purchased by global companies to help their staff learn how to be in these online meetings.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. Like I talked to a company earlier this week that's based in Beaverton, and they're experts in supply chain and fintech. And I tied this one back actually to a lot that happens in the Mid Valley because they work with companies to help them automate their currency exchange as their products move around the global supply chain. And all I could think about was, our hazelnuts or
Hmm.
something that's being manufactured, and like what an interesting opportunity, because they were saying that a company could see 20% savings in their shipping process just by implementing this tool. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's so neat. And that's like happening like right here.
Yeah. That is awesome. Alex told me a story about some big farm company who needed to, out in the Midwest, who needed to do some kind of cover crop and is using drones to put down grass seed. And so grass seed farmer here in the valley, probably 20 minutes outside of where we live, said, yeah, we'll send you this huge amount of grass seed. And they send it up in a drone and drop it out over probably thousands of acres.
Yeah.
So really cool stuff happening.
It's really cool. And like, it's really inspiring to get to see that happening every day. And like, that's what I love about my job is I have a front seat, and then I get to hear about how that's driving our economy forward. And then I get to answer big, hard questions like, well, are we going to have like enough employees to do this in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And I'm
Yeah.
like, we're going to work on that. Like, that's what we're going to do.
That'll be a fun problem to solve. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, tell me a little bit about the worlds of technology and agriculture and where you've been seeing them overlap, maybe in the last 5 years. And then, like you said, I think you've talked about before, the digital transformation that got a big kick in the butt in the last 6 months. So maybe how they overlap just kind of in a natural way, and how that's been just completely expanded really, really quickly.
When I started looking into the sector, I was actually overwhelmed by how many tech solutions there are for producers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in particular, like you go to any kind of conference and there's vendor booths with, hey, this is the tech, and there's platforms, and there's databases, and there's hardware, and there's software, and there's all kinds of different tech solutions. And I think what I quickly learned and heard and saw is that they're all pretty siloed.
Mm-hmm.
And for a state like Oregon that has such diversity of crops, they don't necessarily apply for a specialty crop. There's something that's more mass market.
Okay.
And
So like
what
a corn or a soy or a
corn or soy, absolutely.
maybe
And
wheat.
and so what I think I've seen in the last 6 months, and I would say this is across the board, not just ag, is all of those like different silos of like, here's one thing you can be doing and here's another thing you can be doing, have kind of just like had the doors blown off, because the only option for most of us, and ag is a little different because there's a large in-person component, but the biggest option for getting work done is in some kind of digital world. And so like Microsoft recently announced on their ag platform different ways to do food traceability. And like, that's a really interesting concept because it's not just an application. And I think you're going to see this shift towards platforms that lots of different things could potentially run on,
Mm-hmm.
versus this uh, here's one app to do this, here's one app to do that, here's a third app to do that, and here's a piece of hardware that might connect to one of them, but if it doesn't, there's like another way that you can upload that data to the cloud and then use the Zapier integration to make it connect. Like, I think that we're going to see that that's overly complicated and way too expensive.
Yeah.
And so this platform concept is what I'm interested to see if it will continue to evolve and emerge.
Yeah.
That's from like a pure tech standpoint. And then the other thing that I've been an advocate for, both in my previous state of Georgia and now in Oregon, is really like this infrastructure that our tech can run on. I know we talk a lot about like an urban-rural divide and rural broadband access, and this moment in time has just exacerbated that need so much.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is an opportunity to capitalize on that.
How would that, so is that just a policy thing, or is that something where private entities are going to step up and try to figure out different ways to bring broadband where you don't need maybe tunnel or, digging underground and running things through wires? And is there anything happening there as far as like,
okay,
yeah,
this concept of like working from anywhere.
yeah,
And Bay Area companies have now started lowering people's salaries if they want to live in other parts of the country that are not as expensive.
mm-hmm.
They're still doing their same work. And I think that corporations are going to say, you know what, we have an opportunity to have really great talent live anywhere. And like you were saying, you're from Kaiser, like living in Salem is great for you. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way, but they may still want their job at VMware.
Somewhere based in San Francisco or LA or New York.
And I think that will be the private sector's reckoning to figure out how they can support more of the infrastructure to make that a reality, because then they're making a long-term investment in workforce, but also from an economic standpoint, like they will potentially save money if they're not having to pay these exorbitant salaries. So I think it's an interesting time.
Hmm.
And I'm curious to see how long this goes on and then what that will mean for like the long term
Yeah.
portion.
Have you heard? I've seen it fly around a little bit. The term Zoom Town instead of Boom Town would be a place where they dig gold, but Zoom Town would be a place where you have a lot of relatively high skilled people moving into a smaller, quainter, cheaper place. And I imagine for companies it would be cheaper to probably over the long haul to just run really good internet to that town than it would be to pay a person, exceedingly high cost of living salaries for the
100%.
next
And
25 years.
that sparks a memory. I was on a call with an internet service provider and another member company of the association. And, they basically were like, we need higher speed internet access for our employees.
Mm-hmm.
And the internet service provider was like, well, I mean, we're sitting in a position right now where perhaps we can pilot something where the people on your team or in your IT department get access to something different and it's paid for by the company. And so like, I'm starting to hear those ideas come out,
Yeah.
which I have never heard an internet service provider say for a team of 15 people.
Yeah.
And so it's
But
interesting.
they'll take their money.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. They'll find a way.
So I think that could get really exciting. And then if you could get that type of infrastructure out into really agricultural areas, then you can be running a platform and then you are talking about the operational efficiencies that growers can see. And you're talking about competitive advantage through data and tech that I think we don't often extend to some of the folks in our ag industry.
So that brings me to the topic of the Northwest Ag Innovation Hub, which it's been a virtual party at SEDCOR for the last week after hearing we got the grant. And give me a quick, an elevator pitch for the Innovation Hub as you see it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we bring the technology component both from, fingers crossed, like the advocacy around that infrastructure, but also just the tech talent and then the future talent. And the Innovation Hub, the way that we are thinking about it, is really part of our connected regions narrative here in the Northwest, and providing the same support for innovation and entrepreneurship to farmers, growers, producers, and the ag industry that we provide for software developers, hardware engineers, and platform developers. And I think that that's like really, really cool to be able to take two industries that seem so disparately on opposite ends of the spectrum and look at where they intersect, and realize that like the same way you run a software development process is pretty similar to how you run a growing cycle, and that your ag producers are like way better at figuring out margin than most of your software companies. And it's an opportunity to get our community to contribute to some of the idea development, and then allow our producers in the state to own that IP, to potentially capitalize on it as a different revenue stream, and then implement it to improve their operational and organizational efficiency. No, I was just saying it gives me a lot of hope that we're talking about an innovation hub in a way that the big win goes to the producers and not tech companies. And I think that's really cool because you're turning farmers into basically their own tech entrepreneurs and allowing them to reap the benefits associated with that type of innovation.
Yeah. So one thing a phrase we throw around a lot is industry led. So what's the importance of the producers, the growers, them bringing the problems as they understand them instead of technologists sort of trying to bring solutions that come out of their own understanding or perception, which is like ag is a very difficult, there's lots and lots of restrictions and problems, like you're set by the weather, the time, there's usually price restrictions, there's big global markets. So what does that mean to you for have the hub be industry led?
So I was a smarty pants know-it-all consultant for a long time. It's really, really tempting when you understand technology to go in and say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. And really doing what is called requirements gathering and understanding what your customer is trying to achieve is the new mode of thought. Interesting to me about it being industry led is it forces the tech sector to actually listen to what industry needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's ultimately going to be a sustainability and sales issue for tech companies as well, because if they're producing solutions that no one's buying, how are they going to stay in business? And wouldn't it be much better to understand what the 27 regulatory bodies are that a dairy in Oregon has to submit the same data to, than focus on one hyper siloed problem that you think will solve it all? And so I'm excited because I've not worked with another industry that has such a, what I refer to as a global perspective on what they do. I mean, these producers know their business inside and out. It is so inspiring, which almost makes them better for industry-led tech development, because you're not trying to coach them and coax them into what their problems are. Like, they know their problems. They've known these problems for decades or generations. And you don't often get an opportunity to work within a customer or industry that knows their problems that well.
Yeah, that is a really good way to put it. So tell me just really quickly, last question, what makes you most excited about the Ag Innovation Hub?
So I think it's really interesting seeing the next generation of farmers. And I know you know who I'm talking about, like the crew at Rickrell Dairy, like the folks out at Rydell Farm. Like, it is really inspiring to see young farmers who are also digital natives bringing that youth exuberance and tech savviness into their work. And I don't feel like the world has fully heard or listened to them yet.
Yeah.
And so this innovation hub, I think, really puts the Mid-Valley and Oregon in this position to lead an industry that's not always considered very high tech, and make it one. And I think that would be super cool. And so I'm really excited to work with the multi-generations, and understand the challenges and then the opportunities we have to bring solutions, not just to support one producer, but that could then potentially turn into something that supports hundreds, thousands internationally, and then puts money back into our economy as a whole new ag tech solution.
Beautiful. Well, Cara, I almost did it. Cara, dang it. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and we'll be hearing more from you and as the hub takes off, and we're excited to work together as always.
I'm super pumped. Y'all are my favorites. And thanks for navigating multiple devices, in and out sound.
I'll make you look good, don't worry.
You're really good at your job, Michael, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Enjoy the bay.
I will. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye.
All right, bye.